Maggie. I'm a licensed clinical psychotherapist with degrees in psychology, theology, and marriage and family therapy, a national certification in dialectical behavioral therapy, and a national certification in integrative mental health. In this video, I'm not looking to diagnose anyone. I'm only willing to offer insight into situations like these. It is not anti-Semitic to point out that certain elites throughout history, including the Khazar ruling class, have strategically adopted Judaism not as a matter of faith, but as a tool for political sovereignty, identity control, and economic insulation. Just as the Vatican weaponized Christianity to justify imperial expansion and the British Crown cloaked colonization in divine monarchy, some elite families used Jewish identity not to elevate a people, but to shield their own power. Critiquing those historical power moves is not a hatred of Jews. It is a rejection of using any religion, Judaism included, as a camouflage for conquest, manipulation, and unearned legitimacy. If you can call out papal tyranny without being anti-Christian or condemn Western colonialism without being anti-European, then you can damn well expose elite identity fraud without being anti-Semitic. The real anti-Semitism is pretending all Jewish people share the guilt of a few who turned sacred identity into a political weapon. There's my disclaimer.
We're going to give you a little history lesson here. This goes out to all people all over the place. And we're going to tell you what time of day it is. This record is called Why Is That? And we're going to go through the entire Bible. This is a biblical lesson, y'all. Check it out. MTV in the house.
Kick it off, Chris.
The day begins with a prayer.
Say what?
And a prayer to excuse my sin. I can walk anywhere I choose, because everybody listens to the BDP crew. We're not here for glamour or fashion. What? But here's the question I'm asking. Why isn't young black kids taught black? They're only taught how to read, write, and act. It's like teaching a dog to be a cat. You don't teach white kids to be black. Why is that? Is it because of the minority? Well, all kids follow me. Genesis chapter 11 verse 10 explains the genealogy of Shem. Shem was a black man.
Where?
In Africa. If you repeat this back, they can't laugh at you. Genesis 14 verse 13. Abraham steps on the scene. Being a descendant of Shem, which is a fact, means Abraham too was black. Abraham born in the city of a black man called Nimrod, grandson of Ham. Ham had 4 sons. One was named Canaan. Here, let me do some explaining. Abraham was the father of Isaac. Isaac was the father of Jacob. Jacob had 12 sons. For real. And these were the children of Israel. According to Genesis chapter 10, Egyptians descended from Ham. 600 years later, my brothers read up. Moses was born in Egypt. In this era, black Egyptians weren't right. They enslaved black Israelites. Moses had to be of the black race because he spent 40 years in Pharaoh's place. He passed as the Pharaoh's grandson. So he had to look just like him. Yes, my brothers and sisters, take this here source. Go, correct the wrong. The information we get today is just whack. But ask yourself, why is that? Word up.
In 1965, the former president of Egypt, Gamal Abdel Nasser, said he couldn't respect the present Jews in Israel because they left Israel black and they came back white. Because they were Caucasians when they returned, Turkic Mongol Asians from the Caucasus Mountains, the Russian steppes. Song of Solomon, chapter 1, verse 5. I am black but comely, O ye daughters of Jerusalem, as the tents of Kedar, as the curtains of Solomon. I am black. The Hebrew word there is shachar ha-anya. It literally translates to, I am dark-skinned. Strong's number, and I don't use Strong's numbers very often, but there's gonna be pushback. Strong's number 7838, shachar, from Strong's number 7835, dusky. So the word shachar means dusky. And if you look in the concise Oxford English Dictionary in the 10th edition, dusky means darkish in color, euphemistic of a person black and dark-skinned. Black and dark-skinned. Black and dark-skinned.
Hey, everybody. All right, so we're going to talk about tonight are all Jews Khazarian? And I kind of wanted to set the stage by playing all those videos in the beginning. But before we get started, let me say hi to some people, because it looks like, and Adric knew that was Karis one. Adric says it's on. He's first. Eddie is here. He's second. Auntie is here as well. Hi, Auntie, my favorite Auntie. TGIF to you, Adric. Cosmic Surfer TV is here. Made it in time. Peace of planet. Peace and blessings to you as well. And Adric says knowledge of self. That is so true. And all of you watching from the clouds, please feel free to say hello. This is the best live tribe on YouTube. And shout out to the replay gang and anybody who shows up late. Oh, look, Accidental Hero is in. Peace to you as well. So we do have a special guest today. So I have my intro. So it is my great honor to introduce Adrian Hicks. He's the vice president of our local Community Benefits Association. Adrian is a dedicated researcher whose work reflects both rigor and relevance, and he holds the unique distinction of being the first, and to date, the only member of the Kansas Education Research Network without a formal degree. His inclusion speaks volumes about the quality and impact of his scholarship. Adrian is widely respected across sectors for his insight, integrity, and unwavering commitment to equity and community-centered research. Among his many contributions, his leadership within the Community Benefits Association has been instrumental in advancing practices that meaningfully reflect the voices and needs of our neighborhoods. On a personal note, I hold Adrian in the highest regard, not only as a colleague and collaborator, but as one of my very best friends. Our work together as co-authors has deepened my appreciation for his intellect, his generosity, and his vision for what is possible when research is guided by justice and grounded in lived experience. Please join me in welcoming Adrian Hicks.
Hey, what's going on?
Oh, fellow Kansan in the chat. Accidental Hero.
Okay.
Awesome.
Yeah, that's what's up.
Awesome. So
I especially appreciate that intro starting with KRS-One. It makes me feel good about my choice of clothing with all of my 1990s cassettes, on the front of it.
Yeah.
So
shout out to Generation X as well.
Absolutely. It's the best
Okay,
hip-hop.
so thank you for being here. I think, I'd asked you here because we have the most amazing conversations, and this was something that we've been talking about for a long time.
Mm-hmm.
But this particular conversation started with a Candace Owens video, which kind of surprised us both.
Right. It's kind of bizarro world at any point that I agree with Candace Owens. So, but,
Yeah.
This is that broken clock rhetoric.
Yeah, right. Twice a day.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So the first thing, though, I want to talk about, something she talked about, was about Kyrie Irving. So just to get people up to speed, Kyrie Irving posted a link to a documentary on X. The name of the documentary was Hebrews to Negroes, Wake Up Black America. I'm going to read the Amazon product description. And then, Adrian, if you could tell people about what was happening with Kyrie, that would be great. So the product description is the movie Hebrews to Negroes, Wake Up Black America uncovers the true identity of the children of Israel by proving the true ethnicity of Abraham, Ishmael, Isaac, Jacob, the sons of Ham, Shem, and Japheth. Find out what Islam, Judaism, and Christianity has covered up for centuries in regards to the true biblical Israelite identity of the so-called Negro in this movie packed with tons of research. All right, take it away, Adrian.
Well, as I remember what happened with Kyrie, and out of his own mouth, he said that all he was really looking for was information on Yahweh, which interesting segue. Obviously, given the topics that you've covered here more recently, he was looking for information on Yahweh, and the title of that book came up, and you can readily, or excuse me. Title of the documentary came up. You can readily go find that on Amazon. And so all he did was just post a picture of the front cover of the book, and then everything else spun out of control, just by the mere mention of that book, not even really getting into it. In fact, he just posted up a picture. He didn't even offer any opinion or commentary about it, just the picture. And that was enough to spin off all of this activity, up to and including them threatening to remove him from his livelihood, playing basketball.
Absolutely. Okay, so I do want to play some clips from that Candace Owens show. First, want to point out Cosmic Surfer TV said, kudos to you, Adrian. Keep up the great work. And Leon is in here. Also, Auntie says, yo, Adrian, from Auntie.
Hey, Auntie.
Spainman is in here as well. Hola to you. And Obel 3 is here. Leon does want to put his pretty face up on the panel at some point in time. So, all right, let me get this pulled up here. I have so many movie or video clips to show that to keep them all organized.
Yeah,
okay,
right.
Let's play this clip.
Past. You guys remember when Kyrie Irving?
I went on the Amazon Prime. I was like, you know what? Let me see if there are any documentaries on Yahweh. So went in the search bar, typed in Yahweh. That came up. Went out and shared it on my platform. That was my night. In terms of the backlash, or what people call it, we're in 2022. History is not supposed to be hidden from anybody. And I'm not a divisive person when it comes to religion. I embrace all walks of life. You see it on all my platforms. I talk to all races, all cultures, all religions. And my response would be, it's not about educating yourself on what Semitism is and what anti-Semitism is. It's really about learning the root words of where these come from and understanding that this is an African heritage that is also belonging to the people. Africa is in it, whether we want to dismiss it or not. So the claims of anti-Semitism and who are the original chosen people of God, and we go into these religious conversations and it's a big no-no. I don't live my way like that. I don't live my life that way. Excuse me. I grew up in a melting pot, and I say a melting pot of all races: white, black, red, yellow, Jewish, Christian, Muslim, and you can see the way I live my life now. I'm not here to be divisive, so they could push their agenda. I don't want to say they, because I'm not identifying any one group or race of people, but I'm in a unique position to have a level of influence on my community. And what I post does not mean that I support everything that's being said or everything that's being done, or I'm campaigning for anything. All I do is post things for my people in my community and those that it's actually going to impact. Anybody else that has criticism, it obviously wasn't meant for them.
Hopefully I'm understanding what you said, and I want to make sure I get it right, because I don't want to misquote.
I don't expect understanding from a media conglomerate group that sincerely talks about the game of basketball, and then we bring up religion as if it's correlative at times when it's convenient for people to bring it up. So please just be direct with your question, so we can move on from this and I can talk about the game and go home to my son Elohim and my wife Marlene. Okay.
It's interesting because, I wanted to get that part where he was like, I don't expect you to be clear on this because you report on sports.
Right.
And now we're
Right.
talking about these like deep ancient roots of religion for some reason.
Well, we know the reason, but we're not supposed to say anything, right? And that's what he
Right.
was up against.
Right. And, he does bring up a good point that it is also, regardless of what people want to believe, the history of the Jews, the history of all the Abrahamic religions, even if you want to argue that they weren't black, that they looked like Liz Taylor, all the stories in the Bible move around Egypt and Africa, and people want to
Right.
pretend like Egypt is not in Africa.
Right. Right. Like it's this whole nother country somewhere far removed, and not like it's like, only a few countries over from Ethiopia.
Right. And we have Nubia, the Nubio-Kemetic area around there. So, people understand what, that if you say somebody is Nubian, that they are very dark, right? But, that's right there by Egypt, but we want to pretend like people in Egypt are all light-skinned with light eyes.
Right. And if I'm not mistaken on the history, it was the Nubians who, kind of founded Egypt. What
Right.
we
It was the
understand is Ethiopia.
Nubio-Kemetic Empire before, they didn't call it Egypt. We
Right.
called it Egypt.
Yeah.
So it was
Absolutely.
one gigantic empire.
Mhm.
So let's talk about what the NBA, just from posting up this link about a documentary. He didn't make the documentary. He didn't sign off on the documentary. He didn't star in it. He didn't say whether it was right or wrong or otherwise. But let's look at what the NBA wanted him to do. It's a little bit later in this.
Yeah.
Okay. Absurd. Do you remember this headline that was going on? This is what Kyrie Irving must do to get his life back for having tweeted out a link to a documentary that's available on Amazon. Not Jeff Bezos, but Kyrie Irving is at fault. Not Jeff Bezos for making it readily available on Amazon. First set of things that he had to do. The first thing he had to do is he had to issue an apology for posting a link to the movie, condemn the harmful and false content, and make it clear that he does not have anti-Jewish beliefs. Secondly, he had to complete the anti-hate causes that the Irving and the Nets and the ADL, keep that topic, we're going to talk about more about the ADL today, agreed upon in their joint release, which included a $500,000 donation toward causes and organizations that work to eradicate hate and intolerance in communities. He was then told he had to complete sensitivity training created by the Nets. He was then told he had to complete anti-Semitic, anti-hate training designed by the Nets, and meet with representatives from the ADL as well as Jewish community leaders in Brooklyn. And the last one was after completing steps 1 through 5, he had to meet with the owner of the Nets, Joe Tsai, and lead franchise officials and demonstrate the lessons that he learned. Okay, so this was just like a whipping, a public whipping. It made entirely no sense. And I don't think he actually ended up doing any of that, because then there was outrage and outcry, rightfully so, from the Black community going, what are you doing?
You responded to Joe Tsai's comment about Kyrie on Twitter. What about that bothered you? And what about Joe Tsai's comment? And then what, if anything, that the league has done has bothered you?
Yeah, his response was alarming to me. I tweeted it out yesterday. He didn't say that the organization was working together to get Kyrie back on the floor. He said that he had more work to do. And our society has more work to do, including Joe Tsai. And it's 2022. It takes 10 minutes of time to see who, these business owners, corporations, et cetera, who they're associated with, who they're doing business with, who they're affiliated with. And I'm vice president of the union, and it's part of my job to protect our players legally. And to see Phil Knight first come out and condemn, Kyrie, and also see Joe Tsai say he has more work to do, I think it's time for a larger conversation. And Adam came out and said a statement that he doesn't believe Kyrie Irving is anti-Semitic, yet he's still suspended indefinitely. So those are my thoughts.
So when I
So I want to just put in here, because Adric says, if memory serves me correct, that apology didn't happen. He didn't end up having to do any of that.
No, no, he didn't. You know, and I was one of the, I mean, not that my voice means anything, but, you know, I was just, you know, as a private citizen, I'm thinking to myself, I mean, aside from saying I apologize, and he doesn't even really need to apologize for anything when I think about it. I mean, he didn't do anything. You know, what does Jeff Bezos have to pay for hosting it on his wildly popular Amazon? You know,
Right.
and you know, why are we having to jump through all of these hoops, you know, just to look at a piece of media that's readily available um, for anybody to take a look at? Why do you have? Why is it okay to be able to lose your way of life just for media that's readily available to be seen by everybody?
Right. And he just posted up and was like, this looks interesting.
Right.
Like he
Right.
didn't even say that. But how
Right.
many times do we see the titles of things, or we see a meme, and we're not even saying that has to do with us, but maybe the meme speaks to us. You know, maybe it's funny, maybe it's just interesting, maybe, you know, he did say later in a later interview, because at first he said, you know, I was just scrolling through, I saw it, looked interesting, posted it up. I hadn't even watched it.
Mm-hmm.
Just posted it up.
Mm-hmm.
Later in an interview, you know, they were like, so you didn't even watch it, right? Like they're trying to lead him into not looking anti-Semitic. So they're like, you didn't even watch it, right? And he was like, no, yeah, I watched it. And I've been watching a lot of things of that topic.
Mm-hmm.
So
And going further, if I recall, different groups were trying to get Amazon to take it off of their platform, and Bezos basically told them to pound sand, and
yeah,
there was nothing they
Adric's
could do about it.
they Amazon temporarily stopped selling that video, but when I looked it up to get the product description, it's there.
Mm-hmm.
We could watch it.
Mm-hmm.
Now, from what I understand, what I've heard from people, it's not that great of a documentary.
I mean, it's. I mean, there's decent information in there, and you know, it's one of those. It's one of those things, just like with anything. You know, you eat the fish and you leave the bones. It's kind of repetitive. It kind of drones on. I think it's, if I recall correctly, I think the thing was like 3 hours. I think I may have fallen asleep in the middle of it at some point. The thing that I think what Candace is speaking to is that the quality of the video wasn't so great. It wasn't a polished, you know, fully fleshed out, you know, work of media. Like she said, it was almost more like a PowerPoint, you know. So it wasn't super highly polished or great, but just the mere mention of the fact that, you know, there could be other Hebrews or other, you know, Jews is just a bridge too far.
Right. But Bezos knew that title would be a moneymaker.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
It's
And I
clickbait.
think, and they did themselves a disservice really, because it just got more people interested in the work.
It did. It did. It did. Okay, so I want to move on, if you're okay, to
Yeah.
the next point that we're ready to talk about. And that, unfortunately, has to do with Tucker Carlson and Ted Cruz.
And here we go again. Like, I mean, who'd think in the same week I'm agreeing with Tucker Carlson and
Candace Owens.
Candace Owens? It's a bad day. I need to go to sleep.
I know. I said we live in the upside down, so
Yeah.
you know. Okay. It is loading. It's taken a minute.
Yeah. But you know, this is that infamous interview between Carlson and Ted Cruz, where I think Tucker does a good job of laying bare how ridiculous the base argument is behind why we support, you know, this regime. No matter what they do, they can do no wrong, and we must support them. You know, and also just how you know, just how, well, I hate to use the word infiltrated, but just how infiltrated, our governmental system is with people who think just like Ted Cruz.
Right. And just a forewarning to people, I'm going to have a soapbox moment at the end of this little 2-minute of this interview. So I'm going to go off a little bit.
Those who bless Israel will be blessed, and those who curse Israel will be cursed. And from my perspective, I want to be on the blessing side of things.
Of those who bless the government of Israel?
Those who bless Israel is what it says. It doesn't say the government of, it says the nation of Israel. So that's in the Bible. As a Christian, I believe that.
Where is that?
I can find it to you. I don't have the scripture off the tip of my. You pull out the phone and use the.
It's in Genesis, but so you're quoting a Bible phrase. You don't have context for it. You don't know where in the Bible it is, but that's like your theology. I'm confused. What does that even mean,
Tucker?
I'm a Christian. I want to know what you're talking about.
Okay. Where does my support for Israel come from? Number one, because biblically we're commanded to support Israel. But number two,
hold on. You're a senator, and now you're throwing out theology, and I am a Christian, and I am allowed to weigh in on this. We are commanded as Christians to support the government of Israel?
We are commanded to support Israel. And what
does that mean, Israel?
We're told those who bless Israel will be blessed.
But hold on, define Israel. This is important. Are you kidding? This majority Christian country.
Define Israel? Do you not know what Israel is? That would be the country you've asked like 49 questions about.
So that's what Genesis, that's what God is talking about.
The nation of Israel, yes.
And so is that the current borders, the current leadership? He's talking about the political entity called Israel?
He's talking about the nation of Israel. Yeah, nations exist, and he's discussing a nation. A nation was the people of Israel.
Is the nation the God's referring to in Genesis, is that the same as the country run by Benjamin Netanyahu right now?
Yes.
It is.
Okay, so for anybody who's listened to me for a while, you know what my next question is. Which Bible? Because there are so many versions of the Bible. And this is one of my pet peeves when people say things like, the word of God never changes. You've never heard the word of God. Because the Catholic Church made sure at the very beginning of grassroots Christianity, there was sort of this tug of war between Kemet and Rome about who would be in charge of Christianity. And it's weird that Rome won out with that. And their very next task was to get a hold of every writing, every scroll, every book. They have miles and miles and miles of scrolls and books that you're never going to see. They decided. The very fact that it's translated means the word changed. We also have imperialism. So I'm not going to go too far into why King James had his version, but let's just say it was because he wanted to be sleazy and he didn't want it to be a sin.
Before you get too far into it, I'm going to ask you your opinion.
Okay.
I mean, do you think that, perhaps Rome's military influence over kingdoms at that time, kind of made it easier for them to win out? I mean, I don't recall, Egypt having some big, powerful, army that was, on an imperialism, or a colonialism drive.
Well, what you have to think about with Kemet is that this is towards the downfall of Egypt. This is on the backside of the hill where so many Arab groups have come in. And we now have an Arab pharaoh for the, in the most recent history. So they don't have the military might. Rome has military might. It's not that Egypt or Kemet didn't, but they had, because they were colonizers from the get-go. Rome always was. When you look at Roman history, you see it. They were also spread out and they had spies. And so there were so many things that played into it. Plus, they had the Jews of the time, they had an understanding with them, which is how we end up with the Torah, the Old Testament, being part of the Bible. So here we have Jesus who does nothing but preach against what the Jews are doing, and then the Romans kill him, and somehow the Jews and the Romans are in charge of Christianity. It's weird.
So you have the seedlings of the term Judeo-Christian
Right.
being sown right then.
Right. So, and then King James wanting to split from the Catholic Church because he wanted to be the Pope of his own church. So he created the Church of England, which made him the head of the church. And so not only did he have the power of the monarch, being the monarch, he had the power of being the head of the church. And by the way, this is the point in time when they are annexing North America. So if we're just looking at a timeline, right? So King James also wanted the Christians in the Americas to maintain their allegiance to England. Okay. So there's 2 verses that are referenced in the Bible about supporting Israel. So this is where I'm going to give information for people. The first one is Genesis 12:3, which is what Tucker Carlson was talking about. The other one is Numbers 24:9. In the King James Version, Genesis 12:3 says, and he's talking to Israel, "Those who bless you, I will bless, and whoever curses you, I will curse." That's what the King James Bible says. The Septuagint Bible, which is pre-imperialism, okay? This is pre-imperialistic editing, okay?
Okay.
So that was first. Because I hate when people go, well, no, they changed the Septuagint. No, this sucker was around 1,000 years before the King James. So
Right.
what it says, this, by the way, this is the original Greek Bible. That's what the Septuagint is.
Okay.
It says, Genesis 12:3, "And I will bless those that bless thee, and curse those that curse thee. And in thee shall all the tribes of the earth be blessed." So this is saying, I'll protect you. I'll give you blessings. I'll protect you. Now you go out and bless other people. You bless all the other tribes. You're in charge of blessing everybody else.
Sounds like they had a job to do, huh?
What?
It sounds like they had a job to do, huh?
Right, right. Now, the interesting, if you don't like the Septuagint, it is exactly the same in the Ge'ez Bible, which is the Ethiopian Bible. And it is exactly the same in the Coptic, which is the Egyptian Kemetic Christianity Coptic Bible. So in these 3 Bibles that are not influenced as much by imperialism, it has that third part. And in thee shall all the tribes of the earth be blessed.
Right.
So interesting. Numbers 24:9, if you guys want to know that one. In King James, it says, the nation, talking about the nation of Israel, right? The nation is like a mighty lion. He crouches, he lies down like a lion. Blessed is he who blesses you, and cursed is he who curses you. Okay, so that sounds like, the nation is mighty, it's powerful, it's a lion, and, whoever blesses you, they're okay. But if they curse you, they're done for. That's what that sounds like, right? In the
Right.
Septuagint, it says, he, this is singular. This is not talking about a nation. This is talking to Israel. He lay down. He rested as a lion, and as a young lion, who shall stir him up? They that bless thee are blessed, and they that curse thee are cursed. This is not God saying, I will bless you, and then I'm going to curse other people. To me, this reads, F around and find out. Right?
Okay. Yeah.
The individual person, lays down. He's a young lion. Who's going to poke the bear? Who shall stir him up? That's what it's saying. They that bless thee are blessed, and they that curse thee are cursed. That's what it sounds like.
Is the bear named Wyatt though?
It might be, and I would love it if it is. So that just sounds like F around and find out to me.
Right. Yeah.
Speaking about a singular person. Right? Now, interesting, again, the Ethiopian Bible, the Ge'ez, same as the Septuagint. And in the Coptic Egyptian Kemetic Bible, guess what? Same as the Septuagint.
Mm-hmm.
So The problem being, it's not just King James changing this wording that became a problem. It's because of a man named Schofield.
Oh, here
He
we go.
wanted to tell people what to think, essentially, about Bible passages. So the Schofield Bible is him going all through the Bible and giving you notes and telling you what to think. And this is where we get the dispensationalists. These are the people who feel like we have to create a state of Israel, a nation of Israel, a place of Israel, and get all the Jews there, because that will start the apocalypse and the second coming of Jesus. And unfortunately, so many Christians believe that to this day. Now, side note, thank you, Adric. He gave the super chat, and it is the Adrian Hicks tax.
That's my first text. That's all right. I appreciate that, Adrian.
And showing that the super chat does work. Okay, so, and thank you for allowing me to kind of go off about the Bible dispensationalists and wording.
No, I was just thinking about when was that Schofield Bible? When did that happen?
That's a great question. Let's find out. Let me look. That's good.
While you're doing that, while you're looking that up, I remember in the latter half of the 90s, being told for the first time. It was the first time that I ever heard, as Israel goes, so does the world. And it was, there was a particular gentleman that I was friends with who was evangelical, and he was fully sold on the idea that these people must be protected at all costs. And I remember, having a Christian background myself, I remember wondering why, what was special about these people that, if they're not taken care of, then the whole world goes to pot. I didn't understand then. And in our conversations, obviously, we've started to uncover a lot of different stuff, and it just solidifies the fact that my gut feeling at that time was correct. Anyway, just a
no,
just
it's absolutely true to question, like, who are they? Who put them in charge? Like, who said they are the ones? I mean, if you look just as the overarching umbrella of white supremacy, who put them in charge to be able to hand out civil rights?
Right.
Why is the default that they get everything and they get to like breadcrumb everybody and like eke out other things to other people, and even to the point of deciding who is white?
Right.
Who are these people?
Right. Exactly. So
right. I totally get it. So Schofield Bible, published by Oxford University Press and containing the entire text of the traditional Protestant King James Version. So he's starting there. We know there's a problem. By the way, King James made over 30,000 changes to biblical text. Okay. But God's word never changes, right?
Right.
It first appeared in 1909 and was revised by the author in 1917.
And this was the Schofield?
That's the Schofield.
Wow.
Yeah.
So right in the middle of the eugenics period too.
Which makes sense, right? Because he's also, this is where, we're doubling down on that Mary Magdalene was a whore, even though, that wasn't true. And that didn't get corrected until 1969. But in the Schofield Bible, she's still a prostitute. This is where we over focus on the Tower of Babel and the curse of Ham, right? Which is why, then the Mormons get a hold of it and turn it into something. This is where this is coming from. So it makes sense that that's during that eugenics period.
Yeah, and I'm not saying that was Mr. Schofield or whoever he was. I don't pretend that I know him, or understand him even outside of the context of the fact that he had his own, notes inside of the Bible. But you think about how many people during that period of time were affected by, the pseudoscience of race at the time. And I'm just kind of thinking about, did that or could that have had any, bearing on how he looked at the world, and thus it, came to life in his writings in the Bible.
Yeah, it's interesting. I'm just kind of scrolling through his Wikipedia page.
Hmm.
He puts the date of creation as 4004 BC. So this is where we get, the people who think that the world
The
is
Earth is
6,000 years
6,000
old.
years old, right?
Yeah, that came from, well, that's James Ussher's calculation of the date of creation, but Schofield goes along with it. This is where we get Christian fundamentalists, right? And then about the nature and chronology of creation. First published right before World War One. Let's see. Then the post-World War II era witnessed the creation of a homeland for Jews in Palestine. Thus, Schofield's premillennialism seemed prophetic.
Mm.
So he was very much, because he's, this is where dispensationalism comes from, that you have to, well, they even say it, the belief that between creation and the final judgment, there would be 7 distinct eras of God's dealing with man. And these are a framework synthesizing the message of Bible, right? And we have to get all the way to giving land to the Jews, right? It says the Schofield Bible significantly influenced the Christian Zionist movement because it argues that anti-Semitism is a sin. Before that, they didn't think that it was a sin to discriminate, right? They still don't think it's a sin to discriminate against certain people, right?
Right.
But that was totally based on Schofield's interpretation of Genesis 12:3, which is the one we just talked about.
And then as a product, life imitates art.
Right, right. And then John Hagee, basing his beliefs on the Schofield Bible, founded the Christians United for Israel.
Wow.
Yeah. So there's a lot there.
It is. And folks in the chat, this is the way that Maggie and I's conversations go. We start with one thread, and then it goes down some rabbit hole, and
Then we're looking
you
stuff
never
up.
know. Right? You never know where we're going to end up. Yeah.
Okay, so we talked about Schofield, so I want to talk about Abraham Pollock. So let me get switched over here. Hi. Get switched over to a different. All right, Abraham Pollock. All right. So now we know about Schofield and his influence on what was happening, right? So Abraham Pollock, okay, sometimes referred to as A.N. Pollock or Polyak, born in 1910, died in 1970, was an Israeli historian, professor at the Tel Aviv University since its inception, professor of medieval history, and founder of the Department of Middle Eastern History. His main areas of research were Jewish history, Arab history, nations of Islam and Africa, and the history of the what? The Khazars. So this is a Jewish man, right? He has a Hebrew name. Now, do you want to give people kind of a heads up why we're looking into Pollock?
Well, he was I think it'll come out a little bit later, but he was an IDF soldier as well. He was a professor, and he was curious to know where do we, talking about himself, where do we as Jews come from? And his research led him back to the Khazars,
Right.
and he ended up saying, okay, so we're Khazarians,
Right.
and if we marry that idea of a Jewish professor, I think what was he, a University of Tel Aviv or something like
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
Um,
He was a member of the Royal Asiatic Society.
yeah. So if we marry that with what modern books or documentaries and things like that, such as Hebrews Negroes, are saying, then what's all the hoopla about? With the modern works, where he was saying, I mean, when was this? This was early 1900s that he had written his work, and he celebrated.
Yeah. So in 43, so 5 years before Israel, he
Right.
published the book, this
Mhm.
particular book that we're interested in tonight,
Mhm.
Khazaria, History of a Jewish Kingdom in Europe.
And I like that. I like that it came out in that year, because this isn't somebody coming by later after 1948 and refuting that the people who later inhabited Israel are or are not who we say that they are. But this is before the establishment of the state of Israel. Somebody's coming out and saying, "Oh yeah, we're Khazarian."
Right. I mean, I've got this highlighted here. It says in his book, Polak asserted that the Khazars were the demographic foundation of the Jews who inhabited Eastern Europe in the late Middle Ages and who later evolved into the Ashkenazi Jewry. Now, the other interesting thing is the next part. For this book, Pollock was awarded the 1943 Bialik. Man, is that Mayim Bialik? I wonder if that's the same family. Anyway, side note, Bialik Prize for Jewish Thought by the city of Tel Aviv for this book. This one, right? The book was said to be of, quote, great historic value, which sheds new light on the obscure subject of the Khazars' kingdom and is important to the history of the Jews and the country.
Yeah, it was important to all of that until the establishment of Israel after 1948. Then it became kind of inconvenient.
Right. So later, somewhere in here, if you guys want to read it, but later on, he's told, hey, you're going to have to quit talking about this because it's, if you're saying that, all the Ashkenazi Jews came from the Khazars and aren't Semitic, that aren't, Hebrew DNA, ethnicity, then you're kind of messing up our ability to have a homeland.
Yeah, you're jacking up our grift.
Right. So you guys shut up about it.
Right.
Right. So that's in here as well, which, I didn't highlight it, but I thought it would be interesting to know. But, I say all the time, listen to people when they tell you who they are. It's kind of like the Hitler show that I did, right? Hitler said Neanderthals were the first Aryans. Aryans are the master race. This is the basis of that white supremacy, right? Neanderthals are the first Aryans. I didn't make that up whole cloth. He said it. And it wasn't just him. He got it from a specific society, which we'll talk about here in a little bit, but I don't want to get ahead of myself. But listen to people when they tell you who they are. It's not a conspiracy theory. This man said it.
I had my my foot to the floor, putting the pedal to the floor on these people, but now I need to kind of back up a little bit. And do you think it's possible that they never imagined a world where information would be so readily at our fingertips as to our being able to find out all of this stuff, in mere heartbeats? I mean, this would have been information you'd have had to go and dig through a library for at one point.
Oh, sure. And, and that's information that's owned by Tel Aviv. I don't know, if they ever imagine that kind of world, because I think, and again, like my disclaimer in the beginning, we're not talking about the everyday Jew who just like goes to work and tries to lead a good life. This is all like
The
elitist
elite.
people,
Mhm.
utilizing different things. These people utilize religion, other people utilize military might. But what they all have in common is propaganda and indoctrination. And propaganda and indoctrination gets harder and harder and harder in this age of technology and access to information.
Right.
Yeah,
Right.
thank
We
you,
agree.
Vincent Muller, and thank you for being here, kind of giving us that lineage there. And then Auntie says we are breaking down their veil of lies. And I think that's true, is that, they come out strong and they're like, that video is anti-Semitic and you have to apologize for anti-Semitic. And like you said, the problem with that is then people get interested in it and they do some
Mhm.
research and they're finding out things. And it's like, oop, you are cutting off your nose to spite your face here.
Yeah. Perhaps if not for, everybody who asks a simple question being labeled anti-Semitic, or, perhaps if, there wasn't a genocide going on at the time, then, maybe we wouldn't be interested in these things and we'd just go away quietly and just accept things for what they are.
Yeah.
Don't raise your head. Don't think, too much beyond your nose. But they've, in some created, they've let this genie out of the bottle and you can't put it back in now.
Right. Okay. I want to move on to another video, if you're okay with that.
Yep.
This is, I gotta find it. Okay, so this is journalist Katie Halper on Double Down News. The name of the video is Jewish journalist, by the way, exposes Israel's dark secret history. Okay, so let me get this one pulled up and get it, because we're going to look at a couple, well, probably 3 different clips of hers,
Okay.
because she has some great information. So we'll get this pulled up. There we go.
There's literally nothing that Israel won't do in the name of vengeance and in the name of continuing Zionism. For some people, the takeaway is, as long as they're not literally putting people in ovens, as long as they're not doing exactly what the Nazis did, that somehow that's okay. It's actually not okay. Never again doesn't mean never again in the exact same way that the Nazis did it. If that's your takeaway from the Holocaust, you really need to look at yourself and do some soul searching. I'm Jewish. I lost members of my family during the Holocaust. And the truth is, Israel does not represent me. Israel does not make me safer. In fact, it puts me and all Jews in greater danger, because as Israel commits these crimes against humanity and live streams them, and in some cases gleefully live streams them, we've seen soldiers doing this, Israel doing that and saying it's in the name of Jews, that will create anti-Semitism. The idea that Israel represents all Jews is in itself an anti-Semitic idea. The dual loyalty trope says that all Jews are monolith and we're all loyal to Israel and we can't be trusted to be loyal to other governments, regardless of where we live. That is really what Israel is leaning into. And you have anti-Semites and then the government of Israel, AIPAC and the ADL, all making the same argument, which I think really shows you the dangers and the inherent anti-Semitism of Zionism. People like to claim that anti-Zionism is anti-Semitic. Well, it's actually not, given that you literally have more Christian Zionists in the world than you have Jewish Zionists. This particular Christian form of Zionism wants Jews to go back to Israel so we can provoke the end times, Armageddon. All Jews except a very lucky 400 who accept Christ as their Lord and Savior burn for all of eternity. So these are the allies. All these cancel culture warriors who talk about right-wingers being canceled are very silent, interestingly enough, when it comes to critics of Israel, who are probably the most canceled people of all. If you're a Palestinian critic of Israel, you're very, very, very canceled. If you're a Jewish critic of Israel, you're less canceled, but you're still canceled. You're just canceled as a self-loathing Jew as opposed to an anti-Semite. which is a significant difference. I mean, I was fired by a network for saying that Israel is an apartheid state. So my being Jewish didn't really protect me. And of course, there's a huge bias in the way that corporate media reports on Israel-Palestine. They're very clear when Russia does something. Russia bombs, Russia strikes, Russia kills. When it's Israel, it's often Palestinians killed in attack, Palestinians dead after bombing. We even know that networks and outlets instruct their writers and reporters not to use certain words like genocide, not even to use the word Palestine. In fact, the reporting by the New York Times on the alleged mass rape used by Hamas was so bad that they had to cancel a podcast that they were going to do about it because there was so little to back it up. Now, on the other hand, you have countless stories and allegations of Israelis raping Palestinians. That got totally ignored. It's really fascinating that we hear time and time again about the 40 beheaded Israeli babies, even though there was no evidence of that. And we do have evidence of actually beheaded babies, children with their heads blown off. I mean, we saw a child literally shredded.
I'm going to give a warning right here, trigger warning, because I think it shows a little video clip of what she's talking about. So for anybody who doesn't want to see that, I'm giving you a warning to look away for probably the next 20 seconds or so.
Various representatives of the Israeli government are never asked about that. They're never asked to condemn Israel's violence. They're never asked to condemn Israel's terrorism. There was a doctor who was tortured to death. If you don't already feel disturbed by the images of Palestinians or the stories of Palestinians, the story of Hind Rajab, who was left in a car to die when she was begging for help, and Israeli soldiers shot up the car and shot up the ambulance trying to rescue this girl. If that doesn't haunt you, I would really urge you to imagine this happening to a Jewish child during the Holocaust. I think that Jews should understand this, if anything, more than other people, because of our history of being targeted, of being otherized, of being compared to vermin, of attempted extermination, of genocide and ethnic cleansing, and of the world looking the other way. That is something that we have to remember. That happened to us. We can't let that happen to other people. That's not justice. That's not how we honor those killed in the Holocaust. Everything that Israel tells you about its founding, about its history, and about its role today is a lie. Some people think, oh, Israel was founded for Holocaust survivors, and then it got greedy and took over too much land and ruined its founding mission, which was to be a safe haven for Jews. The truth is, it was founded on ethnic cleansing. It was not a utopia. I think it's really eye-opening to look at the actual language of early Zionists, because they were calling their banks colonial trusts. They were talking about how natives always resist colonists. In other words, it's not just critics of Zionism who describe Zionism as colonial. It was the Zionists themselves. Israeli society really had a lot of disdain for Holocaust survivors. So they did something very disgusting. They both weaponized the Holocaust to justify their extermination of Palestinians, and they mistreated Holocaust survivors. In fact, they even referred to them as sapon, which means soap in Hebrew.
Okay, so then my question becomes, right? And I've said this to you before, Adrian, but so help me if I'm not making my point clear. Are they the same people? Because she's sitting here telling you, you know, when you research it, and what the founding mission was, and this was colonialism, and the Israelis treated the Holocaust survivors terribly and referred to them as soap. So, you know, something I brought up before is who was killed in the Holocaust. I am not a Holocaust denier by any means. I wholeheartedly believe that it happened. We also know that not only Jews were killed, right? Black people were killed. Gay and
no one ever
lesbian
talks about the Nama and the Herero people of World War I, where proto-Nazi Germany got their concentration camp chops and wiped out those people. You know, we never talk about that. You know, we never talk about those Africans who were slaughtered in World War I.
Complete genocide there of those people who were there, right? So, you know, that always makes me, when I look at how because we've talked before about how the leadership, the elite in Israel right now are Eastern European people. They even changed their names to sound more Middle Eastern. But you can look it up. Like, you can find what their names are: actors and actresses, all of the political people, Netanyahu, like, they've all changed their names to not sound Eastern European. And we just showed how, we have this Eastern European Ashkenaz that came from the Khazars. These are not Hebrew people. So was it Hebrew people, the actual Hebrew people, who were the biggest victims in the Holocaust, and not necessarily Ashkenazi Jews? Because we also see that Hitler never had a problem with Rothschild. There were several Ashkenazi Jews that he worked with and never went after and never even belittled. So it's like, are there two different people that we're talking about here?
Yeah, and what is it, Gal Gadot? I can never pronounce her last name, but
Yes.
her original last name is Greenstein. So,
right,
I
she
mean,
wanted
come
to
on.
sound more Middle Eastern.
Yeah, and I had looked up some information on survival rates of the different groups
Okay.
um, uh, during the Holocaust, and so if I recall correctly, uh, the let's start with Poland. Pre-war, those people were 3.3 million, and they lost. They only had 10% survival rate during the Holocaust. Um,
And that was which group?
the Polish Jews.
Okay.
You compare that to France, where 75% of its Jewish population survived. Danish Jews, 95% survival rate. Greek Jews, 13% survival rate. So, Italian Jews, 85% survival rate. So they were very intentional about who they took out.
Selective.
Very selective.
And
Very
obviously, some Ashkenazi Jews got sent to the gas chambers too, because if we know anything about elites, is that they also don't like poor people. Right? So, and it's like I say in my disclaimer, a lot of what the elites do is actually anti-Semitic to Jewish people.
Yeah.
The standard everyday Ashkenazi Jew, going to work, going to synagogue, just trying to be a good person, all that is now kind of like she's talking about, having to take up for all this crap that's actually making people more hate Jews.
Right.
And it's unfortunate.
Like when I was looking at those images that she was showing of the IDF soldiers, the only thing that I could think of is that, power corrupts, and absolute power corrupts absolutely. I mean, who goes on camera and blows up an entire, building complex and, just looks at the camera while it's happening in the background? Nobody does that, and the reason why is because they know nothing's going to happen to them. But that I can't help but think, there's some parallels there to American white supremacy.
Oh yeah.
Right. I mean, I don't want to get, into a conversation, too far. I kind of dug myself into a hole right there. But anyway, just
it's very similar to white supremacy.
Well, yeah, but I mean, you and I have had conversations before about the smugness of police officers, right? I'll just say it that way: the smugness of police officers, on camera when they're choking somebody out.
Yeah.
And we're seeing that on the grand scale, in a colonial nation building project, in that area of the world.
Yeah, and I'm going to play some of those videos about, school trips and different things, and the way people respond to bombing and mass murder and
Mhm.
blood and guts and death, and
Right.
how they're actually responding in Israel.
And then I have to, in my mind, play that up against, somebody telling me in the late 90s that you can't touch these people,
Right.
because as they go, so goes the world. And that was the exact quote that I was told, you know, 30 years
Right.
ago.
Because again, like, to be a good Christian, you have to totally whole cloth support Israel. And
Mhm.
whatever they do is part of God's plan.
Right.
So if they want to say that babies were beheaded when they weren't, then that's fine. If they want to blow up children and shoot up cars, and it didn't show that video that I gave the warning on, but I had to give that warning because I inadvertently watched that video and it was just devastating. There's just an
Absolutely.
IDF officer, he's maybe 10 foot from a little boy, and he just shoots the little boy in the stomach and leaves him there to die, to bleed out.
And I mean, the screams, I
The
can't
kid,
get
yeah,
that
the
boy's
kid
voice.
screaming, and
Yeah,
he just
it
doesn't
does that.
care.
Mm-mm.
And he's videotaping it. He's proud of it.
Mhm.
Yeah, Auntie says upside down. I always say that we're living in the upside down. Yeah.
Now, before you play this next video, it's interesting to me as Katie Halper was going through, kind of her history with dealing with this, and she showed the picture of herself and the two other news correspondents. It's interesting to note that of the three people that she showed herself, she was one of the three people in that still. Only
Mhm.
one person still works for Breaking Points at this point, because Brianna Joy Gray was also fired for being critical over Gaza when talking about
Ugh.
Israel. So and again, not that I support Candace Owens, but
You're hating
she
this.
could. Oh man, this is rough for me. She could say whatever she wanted to about the black community. I mean,
Mhm.
she made a whole documentary about George Floyd and how it was all false and yada yada yada. But as soon as she had anything critical to say about Israel, she was out of there in a heartbeat. So yeah, upside down world.
Upside down world. Okay. So this is still on the Katie Halper video. And I wanted to go to this little clip here. $33. Okay.
A new Jew that was armed, that was working the land. They were ashamed of the Jews who were killed. They thought that they went to their slaughter like sheep. They were ashamed of Jews who were religious, Jews who were scholars, Jews who were also cosmopolitan. They really did, ironically, internalize a lot of anti-Semitism. There were Zionist bombings in the Middle East that were used to scare people into emigrating out of Iraq, out of Morocco, and into Israel. That's how little they
False
cared
flag.
about Jewish people. They bombed synagogues in order to get people to leave the Middle East and go to Israel, where they would be mistreated, which is what happened to Mizrahi Jews. Some were basically put into camps. They rejected Yiddish, which was spoken by Eastern European and diasporic Jews, and they also rejected Arabic, which was spoken by Mizrahi Jews of the Middle East. Yiddish is an amazing language and it's dying out. And the reason it's dying out is because Israel chose to create modern Hebrew, which no one spoke. And they had a lot of disdain for a lot of Jewish culture. So Israel has always been a racist project in many ways against Palestinians, but even against Jews themselves. And it's been an anti-Semitic project as well.
Yeah. So again, listen when they tell you who they are.
Right.
They are the most anti-Semitic people. Like, they were bombing Jews.
Yeah.
Bombing the synagogues to scare them. Isn't that
Yeah.
wild?
I mean, there was a lot of conversation on, I consume a lot of media, but there was a lot of conversation about, watch out for false flag attacks, when this whole dust up with Iran was starting, as a way to, I guess, bolster support for Israel.
Mhm.
in my mind, this is my own opinion, they will literally do anything, to complete this um, colonialist project.
Right. And gain new Israel.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah. So, let me, well, before I play, I do want to say there's a lot of projection, and we've talked about like being identity thieves and different things like that, but there's a lot of projection. Like, not only is there, we didn't kill babies, you killed babies, that kind of thing. But
Right.
there's also you're making us kill you,
hmm
which is so, I mean, that's very narcissistic. Like, that is a narcissistic playbook. Like, why are you hitting yourself? Like, you're making me punish you, kind of thing, which
Right.
is just wild. Okay, so I want
I
to play
mean,
this
I mean,
last. Sorry, go ahead.
I'm sorry. To that end, though, I mean, isn't that the way that racism or subjugation of people works?
Oh, for sure. Because
If you
first
would just,
you
if you would just,
dehumanize.
yeah, if you would just be quiet while I subjugate you, then everything would be okay.
Right. Right. Okay, last little clip here on Katie Halper.
Zionism actually requires anti-Semitism to justify its existence. So for Zionists, they don't want to defeat anti-Semitism. They want to use it to strengthen the state of Israel. It's also true to remember that this is not a conflict about religion or culture. Jews and Christians and Muslims lived in peace, in harmony in many
For
areas of the
1,000
Middle
years.
East for centuries. This is about power. This is about land. This goes back to resources. This goes back to the West wanting to have a foothold in the Middle East. This is not about religion.
Yeah. They made it about religion later.
Well, it's the perfect. I think I may have mentioned this to you before, but it's the perfect white supremacist project. If you make it to where I can't be held accountable for anything, I can't be scrutinized, I can't be criticized. I mean, I'm trying to remember the recent bit of legislation passed here in America, and or the what is it, 24 states in the United States have anti-BDS
Oh, yeah.
laws on
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
books.
Yeah.
Like, if you do contracting with the government, then you have to sign a clause that says that you support Israel. Well, I
Right.
work in America. I mean, this is, if I think that if America could go back and retrace their steps and do it all over again, then they would tie their white supremacist colonial project to some form of religion and protection.
I don't disagree. So I want to talk about this other piece of research that I came upon that is so interesting. By the way, those of you who are asking for links after we do the live, I'll put the links to all the different things into the description of the video. It'll either be tonight or tomorrow. That way you guys can go back and look at all of it in the way that you want to. Okay, so this is from the National Library of Medicine. This was originally posted in the Journal of Genome Biology and Evolution in 2013. So the title, The Missing Link of Jewish European Ancestry, Contrasting the Rhineland and the Khazarian Hypothesis. So we're not necessarily going to go through all the specific DNA because genomes start sounding like somebody talking about cars and just talking in letters and numbers. And
Okay, I feel attacked right now. Okay.
Okay, but I want to go. Where did I highlight that? I'm going to find it.
It's all right. I'm searching for some notes that I have myself. So,
Okay.
but yeah, again, you have a way of being able to rattle off information about, haplogroups and, blood types and stuff like that just leaves me like, wow, so take it away on
So
this one.
one of the things I want to talk about is that this particular researcher had already done some research on the Khazarian hypothesis, because one of the things that he talked about was that the debate always was that all Jews had DNA ancestry to the Hebrews, to Eber. Okay. So one of the things I want to show here is we showed that the hypotheses are also genetically distinct, and that the minuscule Semitic ancestry in Caucasus populations cannot account for the similarity between European Jews and Caucasus populations. So one of the things that they found out was that European Jews were Khazarian. They were Turkic, right? Which is, that's Khazaria, right?
Yeah.
So under the Rhineland hypothesis, European Jews are expected to exhibit high endogamy, particularly across the Eurasian communities, and be more similar to Middle Eastern populations compared with the non-Jewish people, right? So the Khazarian hypothesis predicts the opposite scenario, right? Saying that they're going to be Turkic, right? And not Germanic. So what they found was they're Turkic.
Right.
And so throughout all of this research, they're showing that Ashkenazi Jews are Khazarian. And one of the interesting things was more so through their mother than their father. Okay. So this is where I had highlighted. The Rhineland hypothesis depicts Middle Eastern origins for European Jews, paternal and maternal ancestries both, whereas the Khazarian hypothesis depicts a Caucasus, which Turkey, right there, Caucasus Mountains, Caucasus ancestry, along with Southern European and Near Eastern contributions of migrates from Byzantium, so the Byzantine Empire, and the Caliphate, right? This is the Islamic Caliphate, which was just south of Khazaria, respectively. So the maternal DNA was expected to show stronger female-based founder effects, right, of the Khazarian founders, okay? So then they plot it, and they figure out, oh, where are they from? Khazaria. Right. So that is a really interesting study. And you can look at that. You can read up on his previous, but this is from 2013. This is DNA, folks, and DNA doesn't lie. So as much as, it could be seen as anti-Semitic, if we look at what did Polak tell you? And he got awards for it. All the Ashkenazi Jews are Khazars. Now the DNA says all the Ashkenazi Jews are Khazars. They're not Hebrew.
Right. And then bring it up to the modern day. And, why is it that they don't allow DNA testing in Israel?
Right. And they've talked about that a lot, that most all modern Jews are Ashkenazi Jews. Right. Even to the point where when African Jews were saying, hey, we're Jews too, that created this huge stir. Oh, you can't be Jews.
Right.
Why is that? Oh, Jews are white.
Right.
Right. Because
and so are the Egyptians, by the way,
Right. We have to take the entire continent of Africa out of this history that happened in Africa. But the other thing that it says that I'll bring up again at the end, if they're not Hebrew, then they weren't enslaved by Pharaoh. It's a totally different lineage. Totally different lineage. And when we look at the suffering of people and we're questioning who was put to the gas chambers in the Holocaust, which I'm going to show some other videos that's going to make you really question it, then, you know, this whole, well, we're Jews and we have been subjugated and beat up and enslaved and this perpetual victimhood forever. And then you find out those people, that lineage of people, aren't them.
Well, you've heard me say before that there wasn't anything looking like Steven Spielberg stomping around North Africa 2000.
Right. Right.
Just was. So
Exactly.
now,
Exactly.
you know, the Khazarians were a particularly warrior or warlike people
Oh, yeah.
who, you know, had fought, you know, into Mosul, you know, and Iraq and things like that over the years, just constant battle with the Islamic Caliphate, and are somewhat credited with stopping the expansion of Islam further to the east. Right. So, I mean, they were there, and you know, obviously, I think the Rhineland hypothesis paper that we're talking about, you know, talks about or alludes to the fact that they had kind of made Khazaria kind of a de facto safe haven for Jews coming out of the caliphate.
Right.
And that's where you start to see that admixture, you know, into the Khazarian people, because they're starting to mix with the folks who are coming up from the Islamic
sure.
Caliphate.
And some of those people were descendants of Hebrews.
Absolutely.
But when you look at the DNA of the Ashkenazi Jews, for some people, there are these very trace Semitic DNA, but for most of them, there's not. And that kind of plays into the hypothesis that a lot of people have in academia, that this Khazarian bloodline was elite. And I can just see it from a you know, everyday standpoint. Like when Khazaria fell, the everyday Jew couldn't go to, you know, the areas in Germany where they went. They couldn't go to Eastern Europe and mix with the nobles because they didn't have money.
Right.
Right. Like,
They
first
weren't
of
the
all,
right
you
type
needed
of
to
Jew at that point.
show that you're a noble and worthy of marrying a noble, and you had to have the money to get there.
You know, did Khazaria fall?
Well, supposedly, yeah. I mean, that's part of the history that it fell.
I mean, you know, it's my understanding that they established Kiev.
They
Or did they
did.
just become a Ukrainian?
Probably, because if you want to back up from there, the area of Ukraine, Kiev, was also the homeland of the Gothic Empire. So the Goths were in that same exact place, and Kiev, Ukraine, was their motherland.
Now we're starting to get into that Thule society, right?
Yes. The Aryans. But I'm going to make an argument for that today too, and show you why that. Okay. So let's go into a video also from Double Down News. There's 2 videos from Double Down News that I want to do. This journalist's name is Laura Albarno. The video is called The Video Netanyahu Doesn't Want You to See. So let me get this pulled up. Okay.
Maggie, how's everyone doing in the chat?
I think they're doing well. Vincent is sharing a lot of esoteric information. That's good. Spain Man is sharing a lot of good information too, and as is Adric. I think I literally am going to have to go back and read comments because people have such good information. Yeah, Adric's got a lot of stuff. Spain Man's got a lot of stuff. Leon was sharing stuff. Leon's a little bit behind. He's catching up.
Okay.
Yeah, he is catching up. Okay, so this one is the video Netanyahu doesn't want you to see. Okay.
There are hundreds, if not thousands, of videos of beheaded Palestinian babies and children, Palestinian children with severed limbs, killed by Israel. And not a single corporate media outlet has reported on how Israel has systematically beheaded Palestinian children on a daily basis for the last 15 months. And yet every single one of these Western media outlets was so quick to spread the mass atrocity propaganda in order to manufacture consent for Israel's genocide by repeating a story about an incident which never took place.
We have some really disturbing new information out of Israel. The Israeli Prime Minister's spokesman just confirmed babies and toddlers were found with their heads decapitated.
I choked up earlier reading this new revelation about 40 babies being killed.
Oh my God.
And some of them being beheaded. And I was like, how can any human being do that to a baby?
So what message does that send? That mythical beheaded babies, because they were Israeli, are to be reported on when the incident never happened, but that Palestinian babies and children, when they're beheaded and their limbs are severed and they're found hanging from trees with half of their body missing, that they are not worth the coverage to report on their experience, on their premature death at the hands of Israel and the United States. Did you know that Israeli occupation forces tied explosives to the body of an 80-year-old Palestinian man who was forced to clear booby-trapped houses, and once they released him, they shot and killed him and his wife? Did you know that Israeli soldiers were captured on film raping a Palestinian hostage? And when news of this came to light, Israeli far-right politicians and soldiers and ordinary people protested outside of the facility where the soldier was being held, demanding that he be released. And in parallel, the Israeli Knesset engaged in debates on the right of Israeli soldiers to rape Palestinian hostages.
שיש מי שבפרקליטות חושב שאפשר לבוא ולעצור חיילים על דברים שעושים למחבלינו.
Well, I'm going to stop right here. I didn't pull it up, but you know what this reminds me of? In the Babylonian Talmud, it talks about it's not really rape if you rape a goyim, so somebody who is not Jewish. That's in the Babylonian Talmud. And then also it gives directions on how to sexually molest 2-year-olds. They have to be under 2, and that it's not actually molestation, and that you can marry a child as young as 3.
Well, isn't this a specifically Talmudic sect of Jewry?
Yeah, the Zionists seem to be following a lot of Talmudic texts.
Well, and just to make a distinction here, the Zionists, the early Zionists, the people who were actually Zionists, not Jews, but Zionists, were atheists.
Yeah, nationalists. They were nationalists.
Zionism, as I understand it, is a fairly new project within the last 100 years. Not going all the way back to, this group of people, the Khazars and their sect of Judaism is what I'm speaking to, being, Talmudic and not of the Torah.
Right. And there are 2 different Talmuds. That's why I get particular about the Babylonian Talmud, because that one's particularly gross. But that's also the one that rabbis usually have a copy in their office. Okay, so we'll keep going with this one.
נוח'בה לא נגמר. אנחנו לא יכולים להמשיך כרגיל.
להכניס מקל לרקטום של בן אדם, זה לגיטימי?
כן, אם הוא נוח'בה, הכל לגיטימי לעשות לו. הכל. הכל.
One of the soldiers,
he literally said, everything is legitimate to do. Even sticking a stick in a rectum is legitimate because that person is a Nakba.
Oh my goodness.
Okay.
Wow.
So we keep going.
Can I say something real quick?
Oh, absolutely.
So here, and I think you and I talked about this once before. There was an interview with Charlemagne the God and Leor Cohen, who is the head of Def Jam.
Mm-hmm.
And, there's all this talk around the influence of hip hop on the community and things of that nature, and how the music is bad, it's tainted, and whatever. They were having a conversation about this, and Charlemagne asks Leor, who is who's of the Jewish faith. Don't you feel like you're kind of a hypocrite for promoting this drug culture, this violence culture?
Mm-hmm.
And his immediate response was, I have mouths to feed.
Yeah. Like, it's in my best interest to ruin your community. I don't care.
Absolutely.
Right. I can make money off of it. So why are you even asking me?
Yeah. To your point, everything is okay to do.
Right. Because we are who we are.
Mm-hmm.
So we're allowed. Okay. We got a few more minutes of this one.
Involved in the rape, had a media tour all around Israeli media stations and took off his ski mask and was revered as a national hero by members of Israeli society.
Wow.
Now, what does that remind you of? Like, to me, it reminds me in the United States, when somebody kills a Black person,
absolutely,
they become
they
a national
fundraise,
hero.
They get $1 million, right?
Right. They get the speaking tour. Hell, when they get arrested, they get to go to Burger King.
What was it? Daniel Penny. Daniel Penny got to go to the Super Bowl, this last Super Bowl, and hang out in the skybox with Trump.
Right.
After killing, I can't think of the gentleman's name on the subway.
Mm-hmm.
Just choked him out, and he gets to get $1 million or whatever, and go hang out in the skybox at the Super Bowl.
Right. To your point, that this whole thing is like a perfect white supremacist play, and why I say that all of it is under the white supremacy umbrella, because it looks the same. And when this first started happening, all of this, from October the 7th, some of the loudest people supporting Palestine were American Black people, because they could see themselves in what was happening.
Yeah, we know what this looks like. We know what this is. But listen to the rhetoric talking about the Palestinians. They're vermin, they're animals, they're
dogs,
right? They're dogs. We've heard this before.
Right. The dehumanizing is very, very, very similar.
Yeah, and to your point, talking about, are these the same people? It can't be.
It can't be.
Because people who'd gone through what, let's say, the Polish Jews went through, losing 90% of their numbers.
Mm-hmm.
They would the Holocaust wouldn't be cosplay for them. It would be very real, and it would be, I wouldn't want to see anyone go through that,
right.
Again. And they would be able to see themselves.
An excellent point.
They would be able to see themselves, in the lives of the average Palestinian, or not even going to the point of, because we're talking about this now because they're actively doing a genocide and like making it real and permanent. But what about the and thank you, Adric, Jordan Neely. That's right. What about the average Ethiopian Jew, that was being sterilized, or beaten, or the Mizrahi Jews, who, as soon as they landed in 48, they just started treating, those people, those ethnic Jews, poorly. This can't be the same people.
It can't be. And to say that this is God's chosen people, like, this cannot be God's chosen people. Like, God chose them so we can put sticks where we want to put them.
Right. If that's the case, then that would be a God that I just wouldn't want to serve.
It doesn't sound like God, right?
And that's my opinion, not the opinion of Maggie, you know.
Everybody knows my opinions.
Yeah.
Okay, so we'll play a little bit more of this one.
Did you know that a young Palestinian boy by the name of Saddam Rajab
Oh, this may be the one that shows the video. So here, I'm giving you the warning again, just in case, because it's tough.
was killed in the occupied West Bank after an Israeli occupation soldier shot him in the stomach? Even though the evidence is right there, it was still responded to by supporters of Israel as being fake or being what they call Pallywood, because not only does Israel kill Palestinians with impunity, but Israel's supporters, to believe that their ideology is morally justified, when they do see images of Israel's policies against Palestinians, they just claim that they're fake, that they didn't happen, that they're made up entirely by Palestinians to claim global sympathy. Did you know that Israeli occupation forces recently killed a 2-year-old Palestinian girl by the name of Layla al-Khatib, who was sitting down to eat dinner with her family in occupied Jenin? She was shot in the head by an Israeli sniper. Not only did the Israeli sniper shoot her, but then the Israeli occupation forces prevented her and her family from rushing to get medical care, and she died. This, of course, is not an aberration. This happens all the time on a daily basis. Prior to October 7th, 2022 had been the deadliest year for Palestinian children killed by Israeli occupation forces in the occupied West Bank in 15 years. But did you even know about it? Did you know that in 16 months of genocide in Gaza, Israel has managed to halve the life expectancy in Gaza? If that isn't proof of genocide, I don't know what could be proof of genocide. Did you know that Israel withholds Palestinian bodies and prevents Palestinians that it killed from being returned to their families? Over 600 Palestinian bodies are being illegally held by Israel, some since the 1960s. Did you know that if you go on Google Maps and you look for satellite images of Beit Hanun, you will see that Israel has completely destroyed and erased that village in Gaza, that city in Gaza, and instead replaced all of the buildings, the stores, the homes, the parks, the schools, the mosques, the churches with thick mud embedded with Israeli tank marks in the shape of a Star of David. Not a single corporate mainstream media outlet covered that story, thought it would be important. Consider, for example, as part of Israel's genocide, Israel has destroyed the overwhelming majority of all the infrastructure that is related to the provision of basic services like electricity, like water, like sanitation. It destroyed 90% of the housing units in Gaza. 90%. If that isn't genocide, I don't know what is. You can't possibly make the argument that the destruction of the majority, the overwhelming majority of all housing units in Gaza does not constitute intent to destroy a people in whole or in part. If you continue to get your information from mainstream media, I wouldn't be surprised if you didn't know any of these stories.
Okay, so on the tail of that, I'm going to play a couple of other things here. What are your thoughts about that?
You know, it's tough to hear about, you know, your 2-year-old being shot with a sniper's bullet. That's some seriously morbid intent.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, I have kids, and you know, as a parent, you have a tendency to put when you hear stories like that, you have a tendency to put your children into that place, and you know, imagine how you would feel. And I'm just having a really hard time with that information like that. You know.
Yeah.
Yeah. You know, in the name of what? In the name of God, supposedly.
Right.
But this is what makes it the perfect white supremacist project, right? because because there's a religious component to it, you can't say anything about it because I can't can't God shame, and I guess unless it's a Muslim, and then all bets are off. But what's been the history of the colonialist project? It's always genocide. Find a Tasmanian for me. You can't.
Yeah. It's a playbook.
Yeah. I think they pulled it off really well in India. There's a lot of very well, anyway, I'll just leave that alone. But I think they pulled it off pretty well there, being able to re-educate that population, to see themselves as being in league with Great Britain. I still don't know the exact numbers of Native Americans who were exterminated here in America or here in the USA.
Well, and I don't know that we have the numbers because I've heard millions, right? I've heard hundreds of thousands. I've heard millions. I was looking at an article the other day that said there was up to 140 million people in North America when Spain came here. And then when it talks about, decimating these tribes and losing 90%, well, that's more than a couple million.
That's a lot.
So I think somebody had brought up Malcolm X in the comments. So I'm going to play this real quick. This is from a show that I did on the Khazarians. So this is episode 3 of the Khazarians. But I'm going to play some clips from that show while we're talking about are these the chosen people? Now we'll be able to do it.
Are you anti-Semitic? Anti-Semitic. You've many of the things that I've read about you, and you've made it mention a couple of times about the Jews and everything, and I'm wondering if you are personally anti-Semitic.
No. How can I be anti-Semitic when the Arabs are half the Muslim world is Semitic? If I was anti-Semitic, I'd be anti-Arab and anti-everything else. No, I think that in this country, there's one mistake that the Jews make. They put themselves in a position where whenever anybody gives an objective analysis of the role that they play, they defend themselves by accusing you of being anti-Semitic. And a Negro is not anti-Semitic when he says that the man who's exploiting him in his community is white, because it is a white man who owns all the stores. Now, is it an accident that these whites who own these stores are Jewish? If it's an accident, then the fact that he says the Jew on the corner is exploiting me isn't an anti-Semitic statement. It's just more descriptive of the man who's exploiting him.
And this is way back then.
Right.
And it applies to today.
Yeah, and that's why I say it's perfect. They've pulled it off. Well, it's almost perfect. We do live in an age of information now, but the question is whether or not we can get the masses to believe their lying eyes.
Right, because that was really provocative when he was saying, like, people were like, what?
Right.
And now it's like, oh yeah, it's totally true.
Yeah. I mean, like you can just watch it happening, and somehow I don't know how, but we've convinced people. You see a video and you watch it happen and you still don't believe it. How?
Right. It's like she was talking about, anything the Palestinians put up, they're like, no, that's fake news.
Right.
They faked the death.
Right.
Okay. Well, let's play some more.
Court of Justice ruled that Israel is plausibly committing genocide in Gaza.
Genocide.
And this is how Israeli society responded.
Tourists and school children are going on field trips in Israel, but not to museums, instead to watch the destruction of Gaza, known as genocide tourism internationally.
So we were a mile and a half or so from 300,000 people who were being forcibly starved to death by the Israelis.
That was Matthew Ho, a former U.S. State Department official and U.S. Marine veteran, who recently took this tour in Sderot, where visitors used coin-operated binoculars to peek into Gaza.
An Israeli school field trip showed up. And these children, they're teenagers, they came from 2 hours away to come and watch the genocide.
The tours are also done in English for international visitors and are included in Birthright Israel trips for Jewish Americans and for all Israeli school children.
School children going to watch the genocide. It's entertainment.
Right. But hit the rewind button, and let's talk about the brutality of the Khazars.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, and this stuff plays out. Today. Can't be that this is invasion of the body snatchers.
Yeah. Absolutely. Okay, here's
take them on organized night boat trips around Gaza while it's being bombarded. This time, however, is not about watching children being killed. That's reserved for school trips. This time, it's about staking their claim.
While Gaza is relentlessly being erased, they took a boat with the first families, ready to occupy the land of those who are being killed and starved to death.
מטרה של גרעיני ההתיישבות להתקרב ככל האפשר לעזה, לראות את עזה כולה ולהבין שמעתה והלאה עזה תהיה כולה יהודית.
While entire families in Gaza are being wiped out, exterminated, Israeli families cruise along the coastline, circling the Gaza concentration camp, gazing at the destruction with excitement.
family trips.
Right.
Family trips.
Right. I kind of see two different things going on here, and it's going to be obvious for you, with how you think and the conversations that we've had, but it's purely a non-religious colonial project having to do with resources and the control of resources in that region to be fed to the same usual suspects in the West.
Absolutely.
And again, what makes it perfect is the religious justification.
Right. Because then you're anti-Semitic if you have a problem with what we're doing.
Right. And again, it's not lost on me earlier in today's broadcast, where it was talking about the largest number of Zionists are Christian evangelicals and whatnot. So again,
they're even
the
bigger.
usual suspect. Right. The usual suspects.
Usual suspects. Okay.
Wow.
I got a few more of these little clippies, and then we'll kind of get back on the regular topic here.
All right.
Prominent Jews. Professor Finkelstein, a descendant of Holocaust survivors, making these very points. He brought it up in a discussion with Glenn Greenwald, one of my favorite journalists who is also Jewish. Take a look.
If you read the explosion of sheer racial derangement in Israeli society, the glee, the joy, the euphoria they have carried on with in the extermination of the people of Gaza, just the postings on their social media, it's a genuine sight to behold. And I am not sure whether it hasn't reached or plumbed a depth well beyond Nazi Germany, even in the years of war. You have to remember, as I'm sure you know, formally, at any rate, the Nazi genocide was kept out of public view. But this is a totally different thing in Israel. This is every night on the evening talk shows. The social media is saturated with soldiers boasting in glee about the crimes they're committing in Gaza.
Boasting in glee. Like, and he's saying it's worse than Nazi Germany.
Yeah. It goes back to the question I asked, a while ago, in my opinion, anyway.
Mhm.
In Nazi Germany, did they ever imagine that there would be a time when people had this much access to information?
Oof.
And now even with all that access to information, and 4K cameras, and TikTok and Instagram and all this other stuff, these folks are so shielded. This strain of colonialism and white supremacy is so potent. It's so good that they can just show you. Like, I can show you what I do. I can dance. I can sing. I can send my children to watch.
Mhm.
There's not a damn thing you can do about it.
Right.
And in fact, I have carte blanche to just do it.
Right. I
in your
can
face.
do it. I want to do it. I like doing it, and I'm going to brag about doing it.
Right.
That have enraged and horrified Jewish settlers throwing aid destined for Gaza to the ground. This was not a one-off. For months, videos have emerged showing aid convoys for Gaza being blocked or vandalized by settlers and Israeli activists in attacks condemned by the White House.
It is a total outrage that there are people who are attacking and looting these convoys coming from Jordan, going to Gaza to deliver humanitarian assistance.
They put their body.
Okay. One more little clip from this show.
I'm going to let them speak for themselves.
These are the settlers in waiting, keen to start a new life, to annex Gaza for Israel. But what of the Palestinians who live in Gaza now?
I just think we need to kill them, every one of them, and that's it. And if not that, because the country will not let that happen, the government. Just the least we can do is just kick them.
You're right. They don't hide their intentions anymore. Professor Finkelstein.
You were saying they don't have to hide it. They don't. Okay, Adrian, I just noticed that we've been at this for 2 hours.
Yes.
And I still have 2.5 pages of notes of things that I want to share with people. So, what do you think about doing
You already know the answer to that. So,
yeah, you know you want
to. There's probably a part. There's probably a part 3 in there.
Yeah.
I mean, I haven't. I have notes. For another 2 or 3 bullet points. For us to go over, but.
Oh, actually, I have
There's
3 more
plenty.
3 more pages. So, and you've got notes too. So, yeah, this might be a multi-part.
It's and you can't you really can't summarize this whole thing. I mean, we're talking about 1,000 years
Yeah.
of a group. What was it? They were saying that they adopted Judaism in 900 AD.
Yeah, the Khazars.
Yeah. So we're talking about a 1,000-year project to get us to this point.
Right.
Right. I mean, we're not going to be able to wrap our minds around this in 2 hours even.
Yeah. Adric made a good point there. He said that all of this was analogous to a picnic, a clan picnic.
Yeah. Yeah.
It is, people get together, there's heady excitement and supremacy.
Make sure you get me a toe,
Yeah, death and destruction and maiming of another human being, and it's a celebration.
Because we can.
Right, a lynching party.
But at the same time, though, never forget the Alamo, right?
Right, and never forget that Black people are violent.
Right.
Not us.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, so we'll get that scheduled. Thank you so much for joining me tonight. I think.
Yeah, this was fun.
I mean, we got through a lot of stuff.
Yeah. We get through a lot of stuff only to realize that there's so much more stuff.
Right.
Like I'm having a hard time not veering off onto different tangents, just trying to stay on topic because there's just so much. There's
It's
so
all
much
so
on the table.
connected.
hmm hmm
And I think, in some ways, maybe we do just allow each other to veer off subject some because it is all related.
Yeah, I mean, if you're not able to see the American colonialist project in the bones of what we're talking about overseas, you're just not looking. It's all
Mhm.
there. All of the same things are there.
Right. And it's all the same people.
hmm Usual suspects.
Yep. Okay. Well, thank you for being with me tonight. I am not going to show people a picture of my dog because I've kept you all for 2 hours. I just am going to say, please, please hit the like button, especially if you want to see more content. It also pushes this out into the algorithm. Please feel free to share this where you think it's appropriate. It's another reason puts it out in the algorithm. Thank you for the super chat that we got tonight. Really appreciate that. It really does help the channel. Thank you to all the Patreons and the members of the channel. I hope you guys have a great Friday, a great weekend, and we will see you at the next part. Bye.
Bye-bye.